Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Today, our focus is on redesigning success from boardrooms to to beautiful spaces. And I'm glad you're here. I'm Sophia, and I help driven women climb in corporate without the cost of burnout. Often I'm giving you leadership shifts from my point of view, but today I'm joined by someone I've known since college, Tia Goode, School of B, Wheatley Hall. Okay, okay. Don't worry, I love it. I love it for you. But Tia's journey it's beautiful. It's a powerful reflection of what it looks like to break away from the box and design a life that actually feels like you. Tia's story, it probably sounds a lot like yours, or a little bit, right? Graduating from a great school and landing a coveted entry level role at a well known candy company. That was me. I coveted the role. I was like, Tia, how'd you get that role? Tell me. Then she moved to sales at like a global rental car company. And then she pivoted. She went from that to stepping fully into her creativity as an interior designer. So when we caught up, I was surprised, but not surprised. I don't even know if there's a word for that, to hear about everything that unfolded in her life. And we'll get into it because today we're going to talk about what it really takes to pivot with purpose. Now, before we jump in, I always do this, so bear with me. I want you to drop a one in the chat if you feel like you're stuck. Like, am I the drama? Like, that's your headspace right now at work, like spinning your wheels, second guessing yourself, or drop a five in the chat if you're riding with Casey Musgraves, like a high horse. Confidence, owning your own lane and not apologizing for it. I know for my music fans that landed, I know it's corny, but it's something I have to do just to add a little vibe to our space here. Okay. Let me see if I'm seeing any ones in the chat. Let's see. Okay. Okay. I'm seeing a few. Okay. A few ones have dropped in. Okay. This is awesome. All right. So, Tia, hello. I know I touched a little bit about this in your bio. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. I'm happy we're here. And I talked about a little bit in your bio, but there are internal cues that we ignore before we finally listen. And yes, now, 2025, now these cues have fancy titles like burnout or misalignment. But at least for me, like it wasn't always that clear. So Tia, how did you realize that your previous role it wasn't a fit? And when you tell me about that, I want to know like what steps did you take to pivot towards design?
Um, Honestly, I've worn a few hats in my career. I've worked in sales for Wrigley's Gum. I also worked in management at Enterprise, and both roles taught me a lot. Mainly that I loved connecting with different people every day, but what I didn't love was the sales and the quotas. And after a while, I just burned out. So I had to do some soul searching because I knew I wasn't happy. When I thought back, interior design had always been a part of me, even as a little girl growing up. I was rearranging my bedroom
Oh
furniture.
wow. Wow, who
Um,
does that as a little girl? Wow.
exactly, me. Sketching, making artwork for my wall. And so I kind of went back to childhood to really figure that out. In 2013, I entered Apartment Therapy's Room for Color contest, and I was chosen for that. The next
Ooh.
year, locally, Tidewater Home Builders Association had a design competition called Dreaming of Design,
Mm.
where I actually had the opportunity to design a space from scratch. And those experiences really lit a fire in me. It showed me that what I thought was just a hobby growing up was actually something that I was really good at and that I could turn into a career. So I decided to make the leap. I applied to VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University. They have a master's program in interior design. And I decided to move back home so I could save up money for school. Luckily, I got accepted into the program. And it was definitely scary to start over, but I knew that I had found the path that would make me happy.
Mm. I like that through the small competition, something you entered like, hey, maybe this will work, maybe it won't work. And then it opened up something in you that kind of you had within you from when you were itty bitty, like, hey, maybe this is something that I could do. And I like how you took kind of like baby steps to inch toward it.
Yeah.
Was there a difficult time that you faced in your new role? Because you're saying that, okay, design is kind of like what makes me happy, but you were still in your role. Take us back. Like you were still in that role, like right out of school. So
Mhm.
how did you, juggle that new role and realize, what, this may not be my happiness? How did you overcome that?
I would say when I first graduated and started working, my first, real design job out of school, the hardest part for me was moving from the classroom to the real world. In design school and in studio, it's very conceptual.
Yeah.
You're encouraged to think big, you're encouraged to experiment and dream. But in practice, sometimes you kind of have to rein that in because you're working with real clients, real budgets, and real constraints. So that
Yeah.
shift initially was a challenge, but it taught me how to balance creativity with practicality.
Yeah, I like that. So, looking back now, like what advice, now what taking the leap and going to VSU, this design school and, pivoting from your career path, what would you tell your 20-year-old self about, listening to those signals sooner?
I would tell her to be fearless, be confident, have faith, and live life on your own terms. I think too often, a lot of us, myself included, we live life through the lens of other people, our parents, our friends, colleagues, society. And we essentially abandon ourselves in the process. So
Mhm.
I have learned through life that life is short. And the last thing that I want to do is look back on my life with regret.
So were you afraid that, by taking this leap that maybe it may not work out? Were you afraid that, hey, I may have to go back and work for one of these Fortune 500, companies that I walked away from? So like, tell me about like that in between phase. Like, how did you, I I guess that's just the part that I wrestle with, right? Because it's one thing to be on the path that our everyone around us tells us to be on, right? And you're talking about
Mhm,
finding your happiness. And I
mhm,
like the way that you frame it or label it, right? Because it's the difference between quitting and leading yourself toward a deeper truth.
mhm,
And it's kind of like once you recognize that tug, that whisper that says, this isn't it, the next hurdle is the in between, right? And
mhm,
often that's referred to as like the messy middle, where you've left the old, but you don't have the full map for what's new. Yeah, let's
mhm.
talk more about that season, but before we move on to more questions, I just want to encourage those who are listening into the conversation um, to quantify, to write down, what does the messy middle look like for you? I want you to jot it down. Like, how are you feeling? Because often when you see it written down, so I'm imagining 20-year-old Tia, at her marketing job, the one that everyone said, hey, this is the role that's for you in your sales role, killing it. But Tia inside is like, this isn't really making me as happy as it should be. I want that part of yourself. I want you to jot down how you're feeling in this moment, because until you see it written down, you don't recognize that it's time to shift, right? Like, not, I'm, for instance, like for me, when I stepped away, I realized, man, I've sat in 4 meetings and I haven't contributed one of my thoughts yet, right? Or
Mm,
I'm constantly irritated with this process, but this is what they hired me to do. We talk a lot about boundaries, but when you're in misalignment, what does it look like for you? Like, write that down, because again, once you see it, it gives you a signal or a clue. Hey, it might be time for me to pivot. So I want to hear more about you building the courage in between, like leaving your safety net without the whole map, right? You talked about going to VSU, but what challenges did you face in your pivot? Like, did you feel imposter syndrome or uncertainty? And before I even ask you that question, let me pause and get us grounded, because a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome. It's like thrown around there all the time. And basically, it's defined as like the persistent feeling that you're a fraud, that you're incompetent or just not deserving of your success. And that's despite evidence of your skills and achievement. And often, like people with imposter syndrome, they believe their accomplishments are only due to luck or external factors. So, Tia, let me, now that I have everybody grounded on imposter syndrome, let me just circle it back. Like when you walked into VSU, right? Because you finished your undergrad degree, you're working, maybe you've been out of school. I'm just gonna guess. So let's just say 5 years at this point, right? And then you go to VSU. Like, what did that feel like? Did you feel like, yeah, I'm stepping into my happy place? Here's the rainbows and the sunshine. Tell me more about that.
So I had actually been out of school for 12 years at that point.
Oh, okay,
Um,
okay,
and
okay.
so there was when I graduated from undergrad, you work the jobs that we talked about. And, I wasn't happy. And it had been about 12 years since I had been in school. So that was a little scary too, kind of starting all over. But I definitely remember a time when imposter syndrome did hit me. At VCU, I was surrounded by people with creative backgrounds in architecture and graphic
Oh,
design and jewelry
wow.
making. And I had come from corporate America. And I honestly felt a little behind, but I had to remind myself, I was there for a reason. So
Yes.
I just buckled down, put my head down, worked hard, definitely leaned in on my faith heavily, and eventually proved to myself that I did belong where I was.
Gotcha, gotcha. I mean, imposter syndrome is tough. I'm happy that you had community around you, you had your faith to lean on,
Mhm.
because often, when we are, let's just be real, like our society doesn't look the way that it used to, right? Often people live near their relatives, right? So that way, if you were down, your aunt was making you dinner, you know what I mean? Or a
Right.
friend was there to just go on a walk with you. And often when we step off that path that we've been pushed on, I don't know if you felt like that, but I felt the push like, you got to graduate, you got to go to school, you got to graduate high school, you got to go to a good school, you got to graduate from
Mhm.
that school, you got to get a good job. And how dare you leave that good job because you feel unhappy? Like, get out of here, right?
Exactly.
A and then to have the strength, not only the strength, but the courage to chart this path, especially like when you're bumping shoulders with, I never imagined that with like jewelry makers or graphic designers. Like, like, okay, I can only draw a stick figure. Okay, so I can't imagine. I mean, yes, you had some experience, designing and moving things around your room, and you were familiar with those things, and you likely had hobbies that you kept going, but that messy middle is just really tough. So I like
Yeah.
that you called on the fact that you leaned on your faith, because often our world is so insular and it's so small that we think about, man, this isn't working, this isn't cutting it, and then our world gets smaller and smaller, and we get more and more internal with how we
Mhm.
process things. Again, community is good. So I just I want to encourage those of you who are in the messy middle. I gave you one piece of advice, or I asked you, I challenged you, write down how you're feeling, right? Because otherwise you don't recognize the signs or the signals. But I also want you to think about who you have as resources around you, right? Who are those friends, right? That celebrate you or want the best for you, that are outside of work. What lights you up, what energizes you? If it isn't faith, like, what is it? What is something that you naturally gravitate to? Because when you plug into those things, they give you courage, and they refuel your tank as you endeavor on this path and this journey. And I like to think about it like just embracing the ambiguity, right? You're taking actions and adaptability and moving forward with that. So Tia, I mean, can you share a decision that you made that significantly shifted your trajectory, and what factors help you trust that move?
Sure. Hands down, it would probably be deciding to go back to school. Kind of like what you just touched on. At the time I had a great job, making good money, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled. And so, after being accepted into VCU, I put my notice in at work. I moved to a new city, went back to school after 12 years. And the program was pretty intense. It's a great program, but it's very intense. It's It's a 2-year program, but it's essentially 3 years worth of coursework crammed into two. And so I was working while I was studying and going back to school, and it was just a lot to juggle, but I made it through. It was definitely one of the hardest things that I've done thus far, but
Mm.
also one of the most rewarding. And, I just want to give the message to everyone who may be in that position, who may be unfulfilled or unhappy, to bet on yourself, because it definitely changed my life.
Yeah, I like how you said that, like betting on yourself, because often when we're in corporate, we're looking for leadership to bet on us, right? For
Mhm.
someone in leadership to tap us on the shoulder. Hey, Tia, you have some great design experience. Why don't you help us in this employee resource group or help us coordinate this or that? But you have a good point. Like, no one knows you better than you. And
Mhm.
if you know that there's something that's calling you or something that you're itching to do, or just something within you. For me, I knew that I just had talents that weren't being used. And I'm like, so to your point, betting on myself, for me, it meant, hey, I got to step out of this role and explore that. Right. So what practical or like soul level support systems help you feel less alone in this leap?
Um, as I mentioned before,
Yeah.
my faith really kept me grounded and sane through that season.
Yeah.
I found a wonderful church in Richmond where I felt at home, and Sunday services became a weekly reset that I needed. And it
Mm.
reminded me that, I wasn't walking through this alone, even though I did feel alone at some times. I wasn't walking through this alone. And it gave me both the encouragement and community to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I like that. I like that you had that weekly reset, right? And I
Mhm.
talked about it a little bit before because I know everyone isn't necessarily faith-based, but it's important to have something weekly that recharges you because often we wait until we have that big vacation. Oh yeah, when I go
Yeah.
to Italy, it's going to be awesome. I'm going to recharge. But unless you're weaving tiny habits or things that really light you up throughout the day and throughout the week, it's hard to not only stay energized, it's hard to stay true to yourself and to your calling. So that's why I like that you mentioned that it was kind of like your weekly reset.
Yeah.
What about now? Tell me, how did you leverage your existing skills from marketing and sales? And what new skills did you have to develop to thrive as a designer? Like, aside from the coursework.
I would say my old career definitely allowed me to develop really strong communication skills,
Mm.
organizational skills, time management, and people skills, all of which were or are transferable and useful in design.
Yeah.
I will say the one skill that interior design has allowed me to hone is the art of coordination.
Mm.
Um, Sometimes when you're working on a project, you have to coordinate the design with other trades, whether that be electrical, mechanical, plumbing. Um, so it's like a group project, and you have to make sure that everything runs smoothly. So that's something I've been able to pick up.
Mm.
Also, believe it or not, I still use my sales skills, even though,
Oh.
I did not love sales. I still use my sales skills. Because sometimes, if you have a client and you have a vision for the project and they don't quite see it, I may have to sell them on it. So that still comes in handy even today.
So selling them on it, like, okay, so they see the design and you lean in and you say, tell me what's not working. Oh, I don't like this light fixture. Well, we need
Mhm.
light in the space. Light was critical. It was like one of your
Mhm.
must-haves. Is that kind of like how you
Yeah. Yeah, just trying to
uh,
see where you know what their objections are, and being able to come to a consensus on what works and what may not work. But
mm,
again, sometimes a lot of clients, well, I won't say a lot, but sometimes clients have a hard time visualizing
yeah.
the end product. So it's my job to help them through that and help them to see the vision.
Yeah, and I liked how you mentioned before that you have to coordinate with other trades, right? It kind of reminds me in corporate about not only a team project, but working cross-functionally, right? Because everyone
Mhm.
else has their own agenda, their own timeline, but
Yeah,
you're like coordinating the symphony and you see like the ultimate blueprint. Like this is where we need to go. So how do we get there? You know,
right.
especially when they present maybe setbacks. I'm just thinking of the design shows I've seen. You know, sometimes they're like setbacks. Like, I know you want to move this wall, but we can't because is
Yeah,
it kind
yeah,
of like that, or am I
yeah.
oversimplifying it? I don't know.
Absolutely. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I love that you're naming both the challenges and the resources that kept you moving. Because often when people make a transition, they think they have to abandon everything that they knew from the past to move
Mhm.
forward. And it sounds like you were still able to take that skill set, those two critical skill sets, right, to being successful in any role with you. Because like once you start walking through that uncertainty, the real magic is what begins to take shape, right? It's not necessarily on someone else's checklist. Again, it's like you're pairing action with adaptability. And
Mhm.
that brings us to design and how you create and your creativity. And because it's not just your work, but it's your leadership, right? It's how
Mhm.
you're showing up in that space. So Tia, what aspects of design energize you most? And did you ever incorporate your creativity into your work? And I ask selfishly because in finance, I didn't realize that I was creative, period, right? And in finance, you have financial statements, you have to do things like, thank you, Sarbanes-Oxley, you have to do it to a T. And I found
Right.
myself weaving creativity in just the shade of blue I was using. We had to use blue, gray, or white. And I'm like, well, maybe navy blue would work. Um, but tell me, how did you incorporate creativity into your work from in sales and marketing? And how did you know it
Um,
was time for design to take
yeah.
a lead role?
For me, my favorite part of a project is the tactile part of design. The
Okay.
fabrics,
What is it? Okay.
textures, colors, finishes, the stuff
Okay.
that you get to touch and feel. And I love pulling them together to tell a story in a space.
Mm.
And to think back, I never really incorporated my creative side into my sales and management career. However, every weekend you could find me dabbling in my various hobbies.
Oh,
So,
really? Tell
yeah, I
me.
think one of my favorite hobbies was thrifting for antique furniture. I would go to
Okay.
thrift stores or flea markets and then refinishing it and adding it either to my home or, maybe selling it to someone else so they could enjoy it in their home. Um, but my hobbies combined with, those amateur contests that I participated in really allowed me to appreciate the gift that I had and to turn it into a career.
No, I wanted to ask you earlier when you mentioned that amateur contest. Were you
Mhm.
nervous to apply, or like how did you just say you were just like, "Hey, I'm gonna apply. We'll see what happens." Like just
Um,
walk me through that because I feel like that is a beautiful example of a small step that you can
hmm,
take toward that pivot, right? Pivoting from your career to
yeah.
something else.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely nervous, but, what's the worst that could happen? The worst is, they don't pick me. But I was more excited than I was nervous.
Mhm.
And again, it's about betting on yourself and taking the leap of faith. And I'm glad I did.
Yeah. So how
Yeah.
do you set personal goals now that like align with your evolving aspirations?
For me, visions and goals are really about alignment.
Okay.
So I always start by asking myself, does this fit into the life that I want to create? And that
Mm,
helps me filter out distractions, and stay focused on what matters. I also
mm.
like to break my bigger goals into smaller steps. That way, even if something feels, far away, I'm still making progress and building momentum. So my vision is always evolving, but I also try to leave room for flexibility because my career and creativity are growing with me. So it's less about a rigid 5 or 10 year plan and more about moving intentionally in the
Yeah.
right direction.
Yeah, and I like how you said that you pause and you ask yourself, like, is this the life is this aligned with the life that I want to live? Because I think
Mhm.
often when we're in these careers, we are just so laser focused on the next promotion, right? But the question is like, is this the life I want to live, right? And
Mhm.
perhaps asking yourself when you were in those roles as you're thrifting, you're like, I want to bring this to my world, like just that awareness, right? And
Yeah.
pausing and asking yourself that. Or maybe
Yeah.
let's just say you had a rough week at work and you're like, forget it. I'm just going to stay in bed and just, zombie out to TV. Like recharging and staying engaged with what makes you happy, like that thrifting piece, or even
Mhm.
asking yourself, like, is this the life I want to live? Like that's like self-leadership, honestly. Because that's exactly what I'm about to ask you next is like your leadership style and how it has it adapted to this new path.
Mhm.
And in what ways has that benefited your personal growth?
Um, I've had to adapt a lot over the years, especially when I switched career fields. When I was working in sales and management, leadership was very numbers driven. It was about sales, quota, and
Yeah.
performance.
Yeah, I know
Um,
all about that.
yes. And don't get me wrong, interior design is still a business.
Yeah.
It can be driven by different constraints. For example, I may be working on a project where I only have a certain amount of hours to dedicate to that particular project.
Okay.
But leadership can look a little different. It's more about collaboration, creativity, and guiding clients through a process that may be overwhelming for them at times. So, learning to adapt meant shifting my approach, listening, being more flexible, and really meeting people where they are. So that
Mm.
helped me not only be a stronger leader, but a better designer as well. So I now see adaptability as one of my greatest strengths.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I like that
Mhm.
you're being flexible, just as
Mhm.
you go, right? Especially like as you lead yourself. Because you're right, when you're in corporate, it's very structured. It's all about the quota, it's all about X, Y, and Z. But yeah,
Mhm.
once you have your client and you have your projects, you kind of can adapt as you go and
Yeah,
and lean into that flexibility versus pushing back against it.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
like, are there a lot of risk taking? Like, what empowers you to keep taking risks or embracing change when it's uncomfortable?
I think over the years, I have just had to learn to trust myself, trust my
Yeah.
gut, my decisions, shut out the outside noise and voices. And that doesn't mean that I'm never scared or nervous. I definitely am at times. But again, like I said before, I like to lean on my faith. So I pray on it and I push forward. So my goal is to be a well-rounded designer, and that means saying yes to opportunities even if I don't know everything yet, because I can always learn. And but I also have the confidence that I have what it takes to get the job done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's how we crush imposter syndrome, right? Because we know we have it
Absolutely.
within us to get it done. Man,
Absolutely.
Tia, I really enjoyed talking to you today just to hear about your pivot and how you shifted and kind of like all the thoughts and feels that, happened along the way. Because, often we dream about making a pivot, but we don't know what that looks like. We don't know how that shows up. We don't even know how to recognize the signs. So I'm just
Mhm.
so appreciative that you were able to open up and kind of share some of the critical things or critical milestones that you saw as you experienced this shift. Now, okay, before we wrap, I'm going to throw you a little curveball. I know we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but we talk a lot about design and I like to be creative, but I
Mhm.
think everyone watching would love to see you in action. Like maybe we could do, okay, a quick like hot seat design moment.
Okay,
What do you think? Maybe? I don't know.
let's do
Okay.
it. Okay.
Okay. So pretend that I'm your client,
Okay.
and I want to know, like, what are some of the first questions you ask me to understand my vision?
Okay. So the very first thing I'm going to ask you is, what is your vision for this space? How do you want it to feel when you walk in?
Okay.
Calm and grounding? Do you want it to feel energized? Maybe a mix of both. And then I would probably dig into your style, your aesthetic. What colors are you drawn to? What patterns or textures do you love?
Mm,
And whether you have a certain aesthetic in mind. I'd also ask about function. Is this, for example, a recording space? Does it double as an office, a living room?
Okay.
Knowing how your space works day to day will help me design something that supports your lifestyle.
Yeah.
And obviously, budget is important.
Okay.
Are we keeping existing pieces? What's staying? What's
Everything's
going?
staying. Everything's staying. Nothing's going. No, I'm joking. I get you. Yeah.
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 What's worth investing in? So those questions will kind of give me the foundation to start shaping your vision into something real. And so
You
once
you
we've
know
talked through that, it's not
okay.
just about, what you say you want, it's also about uncovering what you might not realize that you're drawn to.
Well, I like that you broke apart like function versus aesthetic versus budget. Because I
Mhm.
think when I think of designing my space, I see it all together as one big thing. You know what I mean? Like I gotta do
Right,
something with this space, do it. But I love
right,
how you kind of broke it out into pieces. So how do you uncover what a space needs beyond what I say I want? Because I just want it to be awesome. Like, where do you
right.
listen for the unspoken?
Um, I have found that sometimes clients struggle to put into words what they want, and that's okay.
Oh, okay.
And that's where
So
I
you're a
come
mind
in.
reader? You're a mind reader?
You can say that. You can say
Okay, okay.
that. But that's my job to come in and help you to kind of pull that out of you. And so, how I do that, sometimes I'll ask them to share a Pinterest board, or we
Oh,
may flip through
okay.
magazines and, circle what is attractive to them. Other times we may walk through a furniture store and I'll just see what they're naturally drawn to, because sometimes your gut knows what
Oh.
you want before you are able to actually express it through words.
Oh, I love
Um,
that. I love that,
yeah,
Tia. You're
yeah,
right. You're absolutely right.
yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of working with someone to truly capture the essence of what you're looking for. Because
Mhm.
again, sometimes you don't have the words for it, but your gut or your actions show up. And it sounds like as a designer, like you have a key, like you can just see it. You're like, oh, I got it. No
Yeah,
problem.
absolutely. Yeah. And I also look at personality cues.
Oh,
If someone's very outgoing and expressive, I might suggest a bolder color or playful artwork or statement furniture. If someone's more introverted, maybe we focus more on textures and a calming color palette. So it can run the gamut, but my job again is really to be a translator, and take all of those little signals, spoken or not, and turn them into a space that feels like them.
mm.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. I like how you're kind of like taking all of it's kind of like a therapist, you know what I mean? Like you're listening and you're taking notes and you're like, you know what? This is, you have an outgoing personality. Why don't we do both colors? I never thought about bold colors. I'm always
Mhm.
subdued at work. So,
Yeah.
and I mean, if you look at my background, I mean, I have bland colors. I'm truly outgoing. So clearly there's some room for improvement here. So
Yeah.
let's see, if you walked into my space right now, what would you look for first? Like what details would give you clues about like how I live and what I value?
The first thing I do is I'm just going to take inventory of everything. What furniture pieces do you have? What furniture pieces don't you have that you might need?
Mm, mm,
What existing finishes and colors are you working with? Is your layout maximizing the space, or are we working around obstacles? I'm also going to pay attention to the current aesthetic of the space. And, we can talk about if that really fits you or not. Is your current color palette soft and muted? Is it bright and bold? Is your furniture more functional or is it decorative? Do I see signs that the space is really working for you, or maybe it's not? And so those little clues will tell me a lot about how you live, what you prioritize, and where we can make the biggest impact in your space. So sometimes even just the way a room is laid out can be a design roadmap in itself.
mm. I
Mhm.
like that. Yeah, because you're looking at what's there first, and then you're
Right,
looking for, hey, what's missing? And then that
right.
goes back to your comments about functionality versus aesthetics. Like,
Mhm.
who knows? Like, maybe a small, I don't know, desk lamp or maybe more light would be more beneficial here. Okay, and the big one I have to ask is, how would you want me to feel in like the redesigned version of my space? Like, is that a typical question that you would ask, or
Well, my ultimate goal is that when you step into your redesigned space, it feels like you,
okay,
and it feels authentic. So I would anchor the design around both aesthetics and function because, yes, we want it to look beautiful, but it also has to work for you as well. Whether that be lighting that flatters you on camera, or furniture that supports long working hours, storage to, help with clutter.
wait, are you
um,
are you saying my space is cluttered to you?
no,
I
I'm
see
not.
no clutter.
No, I'm
Okay,
not. No shots
everything is
fired.
organized. Thank you very much.
It
Okay.
looks great.
Thank you. Okay, well, Tia, I mean, you
Just an
kinda have me in my
example.
oh, okay. Well, you kinda have me in my feels a little bit, like, maybe my space doesn't really mirror my voice. I kinda felt ouch a little bit. So, tell me, what's one thing I can do to elevate my space to make it more cohesive? Like, I wanna refresh this space, it
Okay.
would be for recording, but just give me one thing that I could do. If I could just borrow your knowledge for a little bit here, your expertise.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you asked. I know you mentioned before when we were talking yesterday how you love, typically when you are recording for your YouTube channel, you love wearing bright colors and
Yeah.
love that about you. Um, but because of that, I'd say your background should play a supporting role, almost like a neutral canvas that lets you shine.
Okay.
And so, a few easy tweaks I would say would be to either swap out or remove some of your throw pillows so they're not competing
Okay.
with you.
Okay.
And then we would probably replace the current wall art that you have with some frame pieces that really speak to you. So that way,
Oh,
your
okay.
style and personality takes center stage,
Got
and
it.
that will leave your space feeling intentional and cohesive. So,
Yeah, because now that you say it, like, maybe if I had some wall or art that was really bold, right?
mhm,
Or had some muted bold pieces, I know that's
mhm,
an oxymoron, but it would
yeah,
speak more for me, you know what I mean? Especially if it was, like, something framed. Okay, that's enough. No more from you. Um, no, but I did like that because you're right. Sometimes I don't even think about it as a cohesive look. I just think, "Hey,
mhm,
is it functional? Is
right,
there any clutter? Let's keep moving."
right, yeah.
Uh, so now I want to turn everything back to everyone who's tuning in. Like, if your life was a room, what would it say about you right now? Right? Like, is it cluttered? Not only your life, but maybe like your career trajectory. Does it feel cluttered with things that no longer fit, like projects or promotions that you don't even get excited about, or does it feel like you, or more like someone else's version of success? Maybe just jot that down. Like, or yeah, jot that down, or even think about one word, a word that describes the room that you're living in right now, in the house of you, right? But who knows? Like, you could be in the living room right now, you may be in the kitchen cooking something up, right? Or maybe you're outside. I have to channel Cardi B there. Maybe just all outside. I don't know. But Tia, thank you so much for being so open, and showing us how design isn't just about beautiful spaces. It's about alignment, leadership, and storytelling.
Mhm.
Before I let you go, I have to ask, like, what are you excited about right now in regards to design?
Um, I would say lately what is really exciting for me is being able to dive deeper into more residential projects. I
Okay.
am currently working with a client in Richmond who just bought her first home, and it's a total fixer-upper. So we're in the
Oh,
process of transforming it into a space that truly reflects her personality.
mm,
Um, I love that I get to bring in furniture, fabrics, textures, lighting, color in a way that makes her house feel like her. And watching a space evolve into something that feels personal and
mm,
livable is always the most rewarding part of design for me. So,
I love that. I love that.
yeah.
Just, bringing those textures to life, right? And that's the thing,
Mhm.
especially if it's a first time home. You talked before about sometimes the client can't see the vision, right? Because I'm
Yeah,
imagining if it's a fixer upper, like, there's a lot of work to be done, and for you to come in with like not only a fresh perspective, but kind of like orchestrating, each phase of the design and making it
yeah,
seamless. That's really exciting. Um,
yes.
So, for everyone joining, here's what I hope you take away. Pivots aren't just about leaving one career for another, they're about listening when something no longer fits and summoning the courage in the in between and redesigning your life from the inside out. And if you're ready for your own reset, I want you to check out my Power Without Burnout Masterclass. It's not just a class, it's a reset. And I'll drop it in the comments. It's gearingtogether.com/GT. But there we truly unpack what you're experiencing right now and how do you lead yourself differently. And you walk away with practical tools that you can implement today to help you find that way to recharge. Like Tia was saying, that she found her weekly recharge, her weekly reset. That's doable. That's within reach. So thanks everyone for being here. Tia, thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for
Bye.
having me.
You bet.
Bye bye.